What were the most important takeaways from the Week 17 fantasy football action across the NFL? Who are the most exciting and explosive players? And who are the most disappointing and downright frustrating? It's time to break it down right here and right now as we begin another edition, another week of Locked On Fantasy Football.
Our Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com. A lot of things on the line there. Week 17 in the NFL. We have now Week 18. We know that for the second straight year and beyond. So still some things to be decided here in terms of the playoff picture, but fantasy football, a lot of seasonal leagues wrapped up. So congratulations if you won a title in one of your leagues. If not, better luck next year, but you got to the championship round, so that's good. Now we'll have also another week here, so maybe some of you are playing in Week 18. So we'll have the complete breakdown, normal week of analysis here for you on Locked On Fantasy Football. Before we can go forward, we'll quickly look back here at the week that was. What happened out there on the field? What do we do to explain some of these big performances and the disappointing performances? We'll break that down for you. Not too many injuries either, which is good late in the season to worry about going into the final week, but a lot of good stuff overall all on the field and some things that wasn't so good, and we will break that down there for you on today's show. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. We're free and available to you on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise? Then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. Listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDON, all caps, when playing inside the game. All right, let's dive right in. We'll start with a positive note. That's a good way to look at things in general. We'll start with all the optimistic performances, and we'll break that down into a couple segments here, and we'll tackle the injury updates, and that's part of the positives, not a lot of injuries derailed fantasy football. Then we'll look at the disappointing performances across the board and why those occurred for many reasons. Game script sometimes involved, and just the team had a bad day is also part of it. Let's look at the guys that had a good day. We'll start with Russell Wilson at quarterback. I figured he might play a little bit better, a little bit volatile, a little bit risky to play him a second time against the Chiefs, but he loved playing against the Chiefs. Unfortunately, he couldn't have bottle those two games up and continue to produce as a fantasy asset the rest of the season. But no Nathaniel Hackett calling the plays there. So that really freed up Russell Wilson a little bit. I think we saw the looser Russell Wilson. And I think that was evidenced by the fact he had 2 rushing touchdowns against the Chiefs, 27 yards rushing, which is a massive number for him because he's pretty much stopped running here. 222 and 1 through the air, had an interception. But Wilson just looked a little bit more in command of the offense. Albert Okwuegbunam scored the touchdown with Greg Dulcich out. It was disappointing for the wide receivers, but it was 2 rushing scores for Wilson. Had a little bit of mentality. I mean, he could have given up and rolled over here with this team in disarray, playing till next year with Jerry Rosburg as the interim coach, but he ran those 2 touchdowns in. You saw a little bit of fire from Russell Wilson that we hadn't seen all season long. So he was a little bit excited about the outcome there, but they couldn't hold on, and the Chiefs eventually won the game. But we knew that number was a little bit too big here in the Chiefs' favor because teams usually get a spark from firing their coach, especially when a quarterback has been tied to that coach, and we saw that with Wilson. So that explains it. Maybe some good takeaway going into next season. They get the Chargers here in Week 18. A little tough matchup here because the way the Chargers defense really playing well. But this is just bodes well. This just bodes well for Wilson for next year having a little bit better fantasy value. Because again, we know he's not going anywhere from Denver, but maybe just writing him off in this offense a little bit too soon, given this offense won't be the same offense in 2023. Daniel Jones, what a performance by him. Speaking of running quarterbacks, 11 carries, 91 yards, and 2 TDs for Daniel Jones. He was determined to get the Giants into the playoffs. They rolled the Colts here, 117 and 1 through the air. So feeling comfortable with whoever's out there. He got a standing ovation and was being cheered big time by the Giants fans. So all signs point to Daniel Jones remaining the Giants starting quarterback next year. He just won a lot of games. And look, the numbers haven't always been pretty, but in fantasy, we know rushing is a big asset, and Daniel Jones provided a big chunk of that. So really took it to the Colts defense, just totally lost here. Their offense absolutely did nothing with the limited punch they have in the passing and running games. The Giants kind of took over. They were a positive game script throughout. Jones just took the game in his own hands, and I really liked the way he ran there to put the ball in the end zone. He knew there was some purpose behind it. Great job by Brian Dable and Mike Kafka to really wake up the best strengths of Daniel Jones. And I think there's a higher upside here because, again, remember how messy this wide receiver situation was early in the season. We're looking at Kenny Galladay and Wan'Dale Robinson and Kadarius Toney being key targets, as well as Sterling Shepard. At the end of the season, he ends up with Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins, and Richie James. And remember, Daniel Bellinger was involved a little bit before he got hurt. So we'll see if they can go out and get a number one wide receiver. I think Robinson is a playmaker that they can keep. I think Hodgins has proved worthy of staying on the team. James is not a bad slot receiver. So if they can get a little bit of help with that true alpha, Jamar Chase type, a Stephon Diggs type, someone like that for Daniel Jones, I think the sky's the limit for him, and he's going to be a QB1 this year because of running and production. And I think you're looking at a guy that could have a big, big jump in next year after kind of needing this breakthrough to keep his job this year. All right, how about Taysom Hill? If he was still eligible at tight end, he performed like a quarterback yesterday. 14 carries, really like a running back and a quarterback, and a tight end. 14 rushes, 46 yards, and a score there. He also completed both of his passes for 24 yards. So you got near extra point there on top of the touchdown. So that is a massive performance. And this kind of indicates that Taysom Hill might be in the plans for the Saints next year. So something to look at there with what they're going to do at quarterback. Andy Dalton, I don't think is the answer. We don't. James Winston is probably not the answer. So a lot of question marks here, but New Orleans needs to be in the market for quarterback. The problem is where they're drafting is going to be middle, late situation, and they don't have that first rounder as they give it up to the Eagles. So Saints a little bit handcuffed where they go to quarterback. Would they give Taysom Hill a shot as kind of a hybrid player the way that Jalen Hurts or Daniel Jones is at this point? Let's watch it and see here in 2023. Tom Brady, this is the guy that we didn't want to bury the GOAT, but we came here to praise him. What a performance here. 432 yards passing, a couple touchdowns for him. Both went to, or all three went to Mike Evans, I should say. 432 and 3 for Brady. He needed this game to prove that he's the GOAT. They needed him to put up the points here. The Panthers came in at a 14-0 lead. Brady took over the game, just throwing all over the park here in Tampa to bring home the division title. But for fantasy managers, it was hard to trust Brady, right? For every given week, you don't know what you're going to get from him. The first matchup was kind of rough against the Panthers in Carolina. But you had that drop touchdown, right, by Mike Evans in the first one. And there was the potential what could have been in that game, that the Buccaneers could have moved the ball at will, put up some numbers there. That's what happened here after the slow start. And they didn't learn from that game and really produce. So the GOAT's still the GOAT, getting it done here with that 432 and 3 with Mike Evans involved quite a bit. And really testament to people writing off Brady. He's going to come back stronger. And that's what we've seen throughout his career. And I think he's still going to have high fantasy football relevance wherever he plays in 2023, where it's Tampa Bay, Las Vegas, or somewhere else. Deshaun Watson, I've seen it in the past few weeks. He's kind of gotten comfortable in that Browns Kevin Stefanski offense. Really feeling it with Amari Cooper. 2 touchdown connections there. Cooper did outrun the entire Commanders defense on the sideline after he got the ball in a good spot from Watson there. So that was one of the scores. But Donovan Peoples-Jones, only catch went into the end zone. Cooper with that second TD here. Watson feeling more comfortable each week with the offense, with his targets. He also had a rushing success here with the 31 rushing yards. So when you look at that, he's taking off running. That's what we're looking for, a high floor from Watson. good receivers. I think they'll upgrade them even more. I think you could see a little bit more from David Bell next year. David Njoku, Cooper, People-Jones. These are not a bad group of receivers here for him, as well as Nick Chubb in the running game, giving them a high floor there. And Watson's going to have success playing off Chubb. And so we saw a little bit of this game as Chubb went over 100 yards. So interesting combination there. It wasn't pretty. It was only 169 yards passing, but I think Deshaun Watson is going to have a pretty good year. We know he's going to be locked in as the Browns starting quarterback in 2023. So definitely on the QB1 radar once he has that full second off season here to get going. All right, Jarrett Stidham, what a performance by him. 365-3 off the bench. Derek Carr being sat down here. Derek Carr-like performance in a wild, wacky game that went into overtime. They really pushed the 49ers to the limit. I feel like Josh McDaniels just let his offense loose with a guy who knew it from the days in New England. And that's what we saw. They were just executing at a high level with the receivers, and just Stidham was very confident. This defense of the 49ers is extremely tough. No one has really scored on it this way since Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. And you look at Stidham, he was just comfortable until the very end in overtime. Unfortunately, through the interception that was returned, that set up an easy game-winning field goal by San Francisco on the second possession. But in terms of fantasy, Stidham delivered. This was easily a Carr-type line you could have seen in a game like this, 365-3-2. All right, there's a look at the quarterback performances that are on the positive end here in week number 17. We do have to talk about the running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. A lot of good stuff, and we want to bring that all to you and the reasons why there in our next segment. We'll also briefly discuss the 4 notable injuries there to offensive skill players that we do need to mention here on Locked On Fantasy Football. We told you at the top that this episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. It is a great game that you can play anywhere, anytime. We're really geeked out by our new partner and sponsor of the episode. Mobile game that you will be into really fast here. Ultimate Football GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing a football franchise? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team. Play through the season, lead your team to glory. You're responsible for hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, making draft picks, navigating your franchise through free agency draft, and all the ups and downs of a regular season. All this in a challenging, realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. Really, I got into this game. We're having a little bit of a locked on NFL host type of contest there. Looking at it, I just like the aspect of the salary cap and figuring out how to negotiate with players who you want to move on from, really build that winning roster. And I like playing GM like that. And it's really the best way to do that with Ultimate Football GM. And you can do that to make a league with your friends and try to get in on that action. We know the fantasy football seasonal leagues are coming to a close. So it's a good time to get in on Ultimate Football GM for a little bit different way to play, but still very fun and good way to trash talk with your friends throughout the season when you don't have the NFL season. Locked On Fantasy Football listeners will get 100% free boost to their franchise when you use the promo code Locked On in all caps. Use that in the game score. That's Locked On all caps, so make sure you check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's right, it's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. All right. We will continue the show here in Locked On Fantasy Football in a moment. Some more of the positive performances, as well as the few injury updates you need to know. Coming out of week 17, going into week 18. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. We're free and available to you on all platforms, and we're excited to bring this analysis to you throughout the season and into the offseason. Subscribe to the Locked On NFL podcast and get daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories, plus in-depth analysis on the biggest games and NFL key predictions every Friday and Monday. Local insiders cover the weekend with game-to-game episodes. Locked On NFL available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, it is time to continue looking at the better performances here of Week 17 Sunday action. DeAndre Swift, he's had an up and down year, but this is a good ending to it. Now, the Bears' defense has been just destroyed by running backs of late. We saw what Devin Singletary and James Cook did to it, and they just don't have anything in the front seven right now. They lost their replacement there for Roquan Smith, Jack Sanborn, they're really weak in the front seven, and the Lions went to town here. 15 touches, 117 yards, one receiving touchdown, one rushing touchdown for DeAndre Swift. And how about Jamal Williams, another massive game at home, scoring a touchdown, of course, 22 carries, 144 yards, a touchdown. This was a early Bears lead, and it was all Lions. They just poured it on here. The Bears could not stop them. The Bears couldn't get back in the game. They didn't have enough passing weapons for Justin Fields. They didn't run the ball at all well. So it was all Lions. They could pour it on. 37 touches combined for those two guys. Doesn't always happen with the game script to support two running backs, but we like this from the get-go for Swift and Williams, and they came through. Again, the Bears just are terrible. They're going to need to make a lot of defensive changes there next season and really, unfortunately, curb the passing game a little bit because they didn't have to throw to their wide receivers. We thought it was going to be a little bit more back and forth with the Bears. Did not quite happen here as the Lions wanted to move on and try to make the playoffs in Week 18 in Green Bay. Tyler Algier, what a season for him. It continues here late. 20 touches, 95 yards, and a touchdown. So Algier really has surprised me. I thought he was a power back. He's shown he's a complete back, has a little bit of juice there. And Cordell Patterson, we'll see if the Falcons bring him back. Patterson looked good and scored a touchdown as well against the Cardinals. But when I look at the future of this backfield in Atlanta, I think really the offense in Atlanta is three guys: Tyler Algier, Drake London at wide receiver, and Kyle Pitts at tight end. The question is, does Desmond Ridder belong in that conversation, the fourth young guy? So you have Pitts as a young player in the second year. You got Algier and Ridder and London, all those rookies here. Is that going to be the future of Atlanta? I mean, I was impressed with Ridder on the final drive. Got the job done here to make sure they didn't lose the Cardinals at home. So a lot of good stuff there from what we saw with this Falcons offense. So I think they have some upside. They need to get a little bit more in the passing game. We know without Calvin Ridley, he's going to be moving to Jacksonville after this season with the suspension. They're going to need to get some receiving help as well. So Drake London, I think, can be their clear number one. Kyle Pitts, a key target. So they need that third guy, and Algier, and the run blocking has been outstanding for Atlanta. So good stuff all around from the Falcons backfield. That has not been disappointing at all in 2022 and now into 2023. Jerick McKinnon, he gets it done again. It's different ways every week, but 5 catches, 52 yards, 2 TDs. It didn't even matter what he did on the ground. Wasn't very much, but McKinnon has just been an ultimate weapon here. So we were asking that question earlier in the season, how would they replace Tyreek Hill? Well, Jerick McKinnon has been the guy playing off Travis Kelce, these wide receivers. The receivers have been up and down. It's more wide receiver by committee with the production, but Chiefs are learning that they have this dangerous open field playmaker in McKinnon, really going back to his early Vikings days. I think the 49ers wanted to use him like that as well when he made the move, but he couldn't stay healthy there. But now McKinnon's healthy. Great story here, and really becoming a great reality in fantasy football asset. All right, Raheem Mostert, 17 touches, 91 yards, and a touchdown. He led the team in receiving, the Dolphins, that is, in New England. So Mostert has kind of taken the backfield back from Jeff Wilson in terms of the key usage here, and I think it's probably because of his speed and receiving ability here that Wilson doesn't have. So very interesting that Mostert, of all players, stayed healthy throughout the season for the most part and really delivered here. So we'll see how it goes in this backfield next year. And the Dolphins are still alive for a playoff berth, but Mostert and Wilson definitely an interesting combo. And I think clearly Mike McDaniel has a soft spot here for Mostert over Wilson. This goes to the veteran special teams, all that stuff that Mostert did to help the 49ers. I think that is carried over to Miami as well in leading the backfield. All right, so Travis Etienne, we liked him in DFS. He came through big time. 9 rushes for 108 yards and a touchdown. We shot out a cannon and ran for that long score. Unfortunately, he couldn't get more because Jermichael Hasty ran pretty well and vultured one there from him on a third down play. But it was all Jaguars in that one. We knew they could have a chance to run all over the Texans. They wanted to shorten the game. That's what you saw. So you got 140 yards from scrimmage or only 12 touches for Etienne. This is how explosive this kid is, especially in a great matchup. It all lined up really well in this one, and that's what we saw. How about Christian McCaffrey? We know he's special, but this is one of his better performances of the season. 25 touches, 193 yards, and a touchdown. There was even room for Jordan Mason to score behind him, but McCaffrey just looked explosive, fantastic. He didn't look like he was slowing down at all. The 49ers have managed him really well here. They get the Cardinals this week, so we'll see how it closes the season. They might be a little bit careful depending on how things go with the seeding, but I think Christian McCaffrey is going to be a huge asset for reality and fantasy in the playoffs. How about Kenneth Walker the third? He looks legit too. He got 24 touches, 142 yards. So this kid was resting the ankle the last 2 weeks. He's had two massive games. This guy's got so much speed. I think there's a little bit of CMC in him with the speed and the open field ability. They just need to get him the ball there a little bit more. And I think there's a chip on Walker's shoulder as well because he didn't win the Heisman. CMC didn't win the Heisman. These were the best backs in college. So I think you're going to see that expanded role. But I like the future there for Walker. This offense is not going anywhere. I like it with Shane Waldron. The offensive line's pretty good. Walker's just very explosive and very good. No touchdowns here the last 2 weeks, but in general, Walker, those are going to come. And I think he could be easily a fantasy top 12 pick next year overall. All right, let's go to DJ Dallas right behind him. 10 touches for 98 yards. That's basically what happened. The Jets' run defense fell apart against Etienne and the Seahawks combo. So that explains the Dallas role here. And they were pretty much running all over the Jets, and that's where you saw those numbers. And how about Najee Harris in the backfield? 24 carries, 124 touches, I'd say, 111 yards on the ground, 123 yards from scrimmage, and a touchdown. So Harris started slowly, but once they got the offense a little bit figured out, once they had Kenny Pickett in there, once they kind of grinded away new their identity as a run-heavy team, Harris has been outstanding. That's what you've seen here from the Steelers. Fortunate feature back. All right, and wide receiver Kadarius Toney, 4 for 71, so kind of establishing himself as the leading playmaker for the Chiefs at that position. Tyquan Thornton, another young wide receiver, fought through an injury, 3 catches, 60 yards, and a touchdown to lead the Patriots. So Thornton has maybe a bright future in that offense with Mac Jones. Where else is at quarterback? How about Rashid Shaheed? He brings it here continuously. Jarvis Landry has been put on IR in the slot. They don't really have a number 2 weapon. Well, Rashid Shaheed was the leading receiver here for the Saints. Chris Olave was just returning from a hamstring injury. Big game against the Eagles. A lot of speed this kid has. I think he's earned himself a potential key role next year over Traquan Smith, some of these other guys that they've had there. So let's watch out for Shaheed. But he's a legit speedy talent that we have to keep our eye on as developing into a key receiver playing off Olave. How about Mike Evans? 10 catches, 207 yards, and 3 touchdowns. It's almost like all those frustrating near misses, whether it was penalties, calling it back with holding or just drops. It seems like Mike Evans made up for it in a big-time way. Now, his fantasy numbers in the end are going to look good because of this particular game and the yardage totals, and made up for lost time. There were 11 games that he didn't score in consecutively, so made up for lost time for sure. 10 catches, 207, and 3. His numbers in the end are going to be very Mike Evans-like. They're just short of the double-digit touchdowns, but we know the consistency wasn't there. But we know also you cannot sit Mike Evans because of the potential for this explosion. With Brady now, we'll see if Brady's the quarterback next year, but there was good development to see him go off, and then also Chris Godwin go for the 100 yards. So we haven't seen this in a long time as these two receivers go for 100 yards. 9 for 120 for Godwin. Helped that the Panthers went up 14-0. The Bucs went a little bit pass happy with Brady, so that all lined up. They didn't have J.C. Horn on the other side, which was huge for Mike Evans. So Horn and that wrist injury opened things up for Magic Mike to go off in this one. So 10, 207, and 3. You got the 9, 120 for Godwin. It was disappointing definitely for Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White. They leaned on those guys a lot last week, but they were out of the element and they had to go to the wide receivers quite a bit. So Russell Gage continued to operate as number 3. You had some drops by some other players that frustrated Brady, but Evans and Godwin came through in the end. The same game, DJ Moore, look, we were all talking about Baker Mayfield, maybe increasing his value, but that didn't really happen. It's really more about Sam Darnold returning to help DJ Moore. Another good game for him, 6-17 and 117 and 1. So DJ Moore's talent is manifested. We'll see where it ends up. We talked about Amari Cooper with that big game with Deshaun Watson, 3, 106 and 2. So only 3 catches needed for Amari Cooper to destroy the Commanders secondary. We really like that matchup going inside and outside. He definitely delivered for us in DFS and Seals leagues. How about Devontae Adams? Look, there's nobody that can really cover him, but when you're making diving catches into the ground that are perfectly defended, you can't argue with that. This guy just made big play after big play for the Raiders. He was their big source of offense. Jared Stidham, we thought there could be a drop-off in the chemistry between Adams and Stidham versus Adams and Derek Carr. That did not happen. They were connecting all over the field, downfield. So 7, 153, and 2 for Adams. You wish we had a little bit more consistency from him. We had the disappearing act last week with Carr. That probably contributed to Carr being benched where they couldn't take full advantage of Adams. But we like the fact that Stidham Fat Adams made him make some big plays. And one thing about Stidham with those 2 interceptions, he was willing to take a chance and throw the ball downfield. Where Derek Carr can be a little bit too conservative, a little bit too tentative in passing, where I think you saw with Stidham, he was like, okay, Adams is there. There's 2 guys on him. I don't care. I'm going to throw. Oh, did it hurt in the end? Yes. He got intercepted in a critical time in the game in overtime, and they lost. But that's what you want. You want an aggressive quarterback at times, so these receivers just don't sit there. They have to be perfectly, pristinely open to get there. And that's what Derek Carr ultimately did here, and that's not going to cut it. How about Trey McBride? I think the future is nice for him, the rookie out of Colorado State for the Cardinals. There was no DeAndre Hopkins, so they were really short-handed there. Marquise Brown and David Blau being starting quarterback. He favored McBride here, so we'll see what happens with Zach Ertz, how strong he can come back from his injury next year. Ertz does have a couple more years on his deal. Could be more of a 12 personnel where you see Ertz and McBride. We'll see how it goes. But it's hard with Greg Dortch and Rondell Moore and some of these other weapons they have, Marquise Brown included, to see how the consistency will be there. But McBride showed some of his athleticism and talent there. How about Darren Waller? He also looked great because, again, you had Stidham pulling the trigger to go to Darren Waller in key situations throughout the game, 8 for 72 and 1. So 2 straight nice games for Darren Waller coming back healthy. Kind of wrote him off as, okay, he's hurt. He's not going to do anything. But the old Darren Waller has been seen. So interesting that we'll have him going next year. And just imagine, folks, if it's Tom Brady throwing to Devontae Adams and Darren Waller next year, yeah, they're going to be a lot like Evans and Godwin. And then you throw in Hunter Renfrow. That could be pretty special there. So watch out for that situation developing. The early thoughts on that have to be on the radar with Carr being benched for Stidham, another former Patriots quarterback. How about Tyler Conklin? He came through the cheat code matchup, as we like to call it, 6 catches for 80 yards. He's really the only bright spot in the Jets offense. We'll get into what didn't work. And then Mark Andrews, we've missed you, Mark Andrews. He came back in a big way against the Steelers, 9 catches for 100 yards. So finally, we've been waiting for this game with Tyler Huntley. It's kind of been Mike Evans and Mark Andrews. What have you done for me lately? When are you going to get going? What are you going to be the fantasy assets we know and love? And they go figure, they do it in the same exact week here. So good to see Mark Andrews becoming Mark Andrews once again when his fantasy managers really needed him. All right, the injuries we'll go over real quick. Nick Foles was knocked out of the game against the Giants, took a scary ribs injury there, and had to be replaced with Sam Ehlinger. So more going downhill for the Colts offense. They did get a touchdown from Michael Pittman Jr., which was nice to see. And Paris Campbell had a big play and a decent day. But Foles now maybe going back to Ehlinger. So been brutal. The Colts need to go find a franchise quarterback, whether it's Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud in next year's draft. You look at Teddy Bridgewater got hurt, so the Dolphins, hopefully the Tua Tagovailoa will be put in concussion protocol, but we know that can be a dicey proposition because the second time he's been in it. So will you get to see more of Skylar Thompson? Will they go elsewhere, much like these other teams have done, to find someone on the street to start? I don't know, but it's not looking good. Bridgewater, I think the reports are that he fractured his finger, so that's not looking good to play against the Jets, and this could be ugly. Remember, the first matchup against the Jets, Bridgewater was knocked out. You didn't have Tagovailoa, and the Jets kind of won that game. That's not good for the Dolphins' playoff chances. So it would be shocking to see the Dolphins free fall in the playoffs, but that is a strong possibility if they have to go to a third-string quarterback this week against the Jets defense. James Conner, another injury, a thigh injury. He got hurt there against the Falcons. I thought he was going to have a big game this week. His absence in the game really hurt the Cardinals' chances of winning that one. But Conner again, hurt again. That's one thing he's fought through and played better with this year. So we'll see. But he was one of the bright spots of this offense. I don't think he's going anywhere. A great pickup for them from the Steelers the past 2 years. For sure, he wasn't the big touchdown scorer he was last year, but he's been very solid in fantasy all season long. And finally, Jacoby Myers had a touchdown in the game for Mac Jones. There's a Tyquan Thornton and the other one, but he hurt his shoulder, so we'll see. Could be a serious injury here, at least to sideline him for Week 18. And we'll see about Jacoby Myers next year. He did have that fumble blunder against the Raiders there. May not cost the Patriots a playoff spot, so that might help, but Myers is a free agent there in 2023, and they might move on if Tyquan Thornton is the guy that they're looking at. All right, we will finish the show looking at the more disappointing performances there and explain what happened for you there from Week 17 Sunday action. Looking for a delicious treat, but don't want all the fat and calories, then you got to try Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. If you're like me or you want to eat healthier, but you don't want to compromise taste, then man, I've got just a thing for you. You've got to try Built. But Built Healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious, you will think they're good for you, and they are. And perfect for your New Year's resolution. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. They come in unbelievably great flavors, such as churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars that you get from them taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is they are healthy, only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. Now, you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built bars at Built.com. Now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie, batter, and churro. You can thank me later. So many ways to get in on Built Bar, Built.com, but also now at your local Sam's Club or Walmart. And we love to have easier access to Built Bars because they're that delicious and a great way to help with your New Year's resolutions to be in better shape in 2023. All right, it's time to close the show here on Locked On Fantasy Football, looking at the disappointing performances and what happened here in these situations. So let's look at it. A quarterback with Trevor Lawrence, we know what happened here. 152 and an interception. He was relieved in the game because of such a blowout by C.J. Beathard. They just didn't throw the ball out. It was all Travis Etienne and James Hasty, or JaMychal Hasty. Not James, the former Jets defensive back, but when you look at JaMychal Hasty and Travis Etienne, just running all over. I bet if James Hasty played, he would have done that as well against the Texans. But there was not a lot of need for throwing the ball up in the air. They were preserving themselves a little bit for the de facto AFC South title game against the Titans at home in Week 18. So there's no reason to overextend Lawrence. So that's what you saw the numbers. The Texans didn't provide any resistance, and that was all over for Lawrence having to have high volume there. Mike White was highly disappointing here. This secondary for the Seahawks has been great all year. He had 4 sacks. They forced a fumble out of him. He had 2 interceptions, 240 empty yards there. So not a lot from Mike White. So Mike White's not the answer over Zach Wilson. We know that. And it was not the easiest place. You go in a hostile environment. We thought there might be some garbage time working in the middle of the field, and that did work out with Tyler Conklin. But all the rest of the Jets passing game and really the offense in general did not show up in Seattle. The most critical time when their playoff lives are on the line. Now the Jets are eliminated. Kirk Cousins, what a rough game for him. 205 yards, 1 touchdown late. I'm really surprised they kept him in the game, but people were thankful that he got at least that. Jalen Naylor, random late touchdown when the game was fully out of hand. They put in Cousins for 1 series, and they replaced him there in mop-up time with Nick Mullins, who threw a touchdown pass to KJ Osborne. But 205 only. Those 3 picks, not looking good at all. You're losing a fumble. That Packers defense was all over Kirk Cousins, both in pressuring him and forcing him into mistakes. So rough outing for Cousins. With that rough outing for Cousins, the Packers pulled away, and Aaron Rodgers wasn't involved in the shootout. So only 159 yards passing for Rodgers and 1 TD. So easy day. The office, he did have one that he ran in, but a very quiet day overall for Aaron Rodgers because Kirk Cousins kind of stunk. And you do want quarterbacks to go back and forth. That's what happened there with Jared Goff. He did have 3 touchdown passes, but I think he could have had a bigger day. And Justin Fields kind of pushed him a little bit, and we didn't see that pushing from Cousins on Rodgers. All right, running back, speaking of the Bears, only 6 touches for 36 yards for David Montgomery. So Lions run defense had that real hiccup against the Panthers, but the weeks around it, they've been pretty solid against the run. We saw them shut down a couple teams there. So we're looking at Montgomery, again, we'll see what happens with him and Khalil Herbert next year, but really disappointing performance overall by the Bears. They just did not execute offensively other than Justin Fields running in that game. Ramondre Stevenson's 2nd straight clunker. We had Damian Harris return. 10 touches, 51 yards for Ramondre Stevenson. So we'll see. I mean, he's such a big year breaking out as the feature back, but then just went into the tank. He was one of the most reliable things in fantasy. So who knows what's going to be with the backfield next year in New England, but that was definitely disappointing to see. Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones had the rushing fun. Saquon Barkley had to battle Matt Breida for the key rushing yards. He had a -5 catch yardage total there, so 12 for 58 only for Saquon Barkley. So big run, big game dependent is Saquon Barkley. this season. So he's been pretty good in fantasy for the most part, but you can have those clunkers when he doesn't have the long run. And he's being able to be contained by the Colts just enough there. We did like Miles Sanders this week against the Saints run defense. Got 61 yards, which is not a bad average, but the negative game script that we did not expect against the Saints. So 12 carries, 61 empty yards. So no touchdowns, no catches there. So that's just disappointing there for Miles Sanders to get that 6.1. Look at Alvin Kamara. He got 81 yards from scrimmage. He did have one catch for 7 yards, but otherwise really disappointing. 16 for 74, that matchup against the Eagles when they were positive and winning the game. So both those running backs in the game disappointing for sure. I also thought Brian Robinson Jr. was disappointing. I mean, there was no Antonio Gibson. He was inactive with multiple injuries. He had the whole backfield to himself. He did get 27 carries, but the Browns' run defense, much maligned for most of the season, slowed him down, only 87 yards there. So definitely Brian Robinson was disappointing just because the opportunity looked so great in that game, and he just ended up with a very modest bottom total without enough catches or touchdown potential to put up his numbers. All right, disappointing among the wide receivers and tight ends. Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill combined for 170 yards and 7 catches. So the Bridgewater change, the quarterback didn't help. Also, the Patriots secondary was banged up. I don't get why they didn't exploit those guys a little bit more. Hill and Waddle just really hurt by Bridgewater being in there versus Tua. So 7 for 107 combined for those two dynamic playmakers. Not what you want at the end of the season. The Washington Commanders, this is for all of them. So that includes you, Terry McLaurin, and Jahan Dotson, and Curtis Samuel, 6 catches, 67 yards combined from that trio. So we're going to blame Carson Wentz on this one. He looked terrible. Threw the ball downfield, got picked. The Browns just took advantage of it. So it was not very good with Taylor Heineke on the bench for those Commanders receivers. Christian Kirk, only 2 catches for 21. Evan Ingram behind him, 1 catch for 16. So we thought these guys were going to be the cover 2 beaters, but what happened? Texans didn't compete. Jaguars ran all over them when you only have 153 yards passing, and Marvin Jones Jr. is the leading receiver. Not going to get a lot. So definitely disappointing for Kirk and Ingram, who had been on fire here of late. Garrett Wilson, just awful performance because of having Mike White in there. Mike White was just not effective at all. 3 catches for 18 yards. Tough matchup. You saw some of Tariq Woolen and Mike Jackson. And those are 2 savvy younger corners, so the rookie was definitely bottled up by them. You have Christian Watson. We said buyer beware in playing him if he did activate with a hip injury. Only had 1 catch for 11 yards, had a chance in the end zone, missed that. So again, the Packers didn't face a lot of resistance from the Vikings. They could go run heavy and do that damage, and you saw Aaron Jones break out for 111 yards rushing, and that's what happened. So again, you do that back and forth a little bit in those types of games, especially for the team that's ahead, and the Vikings didn't really put up much of a fight. Speaking of Justin Jefferson, so spectacular all season long. He was trying to chase down 2,000 receiving yards, at least get the single season receiving record. What did he do? 1 catch for 15 yards. To make matters worse, Jair Alexander covered him well, and he did the gritty on him after a big pass breakup right before an interception by Cousins. So brutal game for Justin Jefferson. A lot of it fell on this quarterback, but when he throws for 205 and he has only 1 catch for 15, yikes. I know a lot of them came in garbage time with Naylor and Osborne, some of these guys, but Jefferson completely shut down by the Packers. Great performance there by their defense, but unfortunately terrible for us, that 1 for 15. Steelers, as a whole, 7 for 100 for their key pass catchers. That includes Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and Pat Freiermuth. They didn't throw the ball on all this. Ravens didn't provide resistance. They were battle of attrition. They were running quite a bit both sides, and we knew that. It was a shortened game. Kenny Pickett, not a lot of high volume. So, that can run into a problem here. So, again, you need that passing back and forth to find that production from the receivers that you're looking for. That did not happen for sure. As the Steelers and Ravens pretty much play that game and the teams that we're expecting with scoring pretty easily on Sunday night. So there you have it. There's a breakdown of the standout performances and the ones that were on the flip side are really disappointing there in Week 17 from the Sunday action. So good breakdown there. We will get to pick up Tuesday tomorrow. So yeah, we'll still have waiver wire advice for you for Week 18. We'll break down the quarterback and running backs there in our matchup Wednesday. Come back with wide receivers, tight ends, and streaming defenses on Thursday. Close the week as we always do, looking at the DFS, which is going to come to play for one more regular season week, looking at our FanDuel cash games, DraftKings tournaments, and of course our prize picks of the week. So a lot of good stuff coming still this week as we do another regular week here on Locked On Fantasy Football. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For a second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. Bringing local insights you love to the national spotlight with the daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this is Vinnie Iyer. Good luck if you got something going here to save a championship against the Bengals and Bills there, and we'll catch you there. We'll pick up Tuesday. Waiver wire advice on Tuesday.